5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to -1 Monstrous Moment. For the past few years, kaiju fans from all over the world have been zeroing in on scenes from their favorite kaiju movies to make video essays about why those scenes, and by extension the whole genre, are so impressive. This time, however, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. You see, the scene I'm focusing on today is considered one of the biggest plot holes in the entire Godzilla series. So I'm going to see if perhaps I can explain it.
How do you intend to do that? Usually filling plot holes requires a lot of speculation, unless there's a deleted scene somewhere that explains it.
True, but I've been dwelling on this one for a while, and I think I know a solution.
Then please, regale us.
I shall do my level best. If you ask Godzilla fans to list their favorite human characters from the series, you're likely to hear a lot of people include Dr. Shinzo Mifune from Terror of Mechagodzilla. In the same breath, you'll likely hear those same fans say Mifune was done dirty. In fact, if they're especially invested, they might even call his treatment a major plot hole. The argument goes something like this. As Ichinose searches for Mifune, he learns about how he was disgraced for 2 major things. First, he was making a mind control device for sea life, and second, he claimed the device worked on a creature he discovered named Titanosaurus. Nobody believes either of his claims, nor could he prove them, so he was ousted from the scientific community and vanished from the public eye. So, in a world where creatures like Godzilla exist and multiple alien invaders have controlled monsters as weapons of war, why would anyone doubt Mifune's claim that he discovered a new species of living dinosaur and invented a device that could control it? Why this arbitrary skepticism against ideas that are common knowledge? I've been thinking about this for a while, and I believe I have an answer. Yes, I can explain why nobody believes Mifune even within the context of the world, and thus explain why this plot hole is no plot hole at all. First, let's summarize the facts. Dr. Mifune, when he was still employed at an institute, was working on a device that would essentially allow for mind control over aquatic creatures. Despite his diligent work, he consistently failed to produce results, which gradually earned him a reputation as a crackpot. The final straw that led to his firing was when he proclaimed his discovery of a new marine dinosaur species that he called Titanosaurus, the only creature on which his device actually worked. His employers and co-workers decided that Mifune had officially gone off the deep end, and so he was fired in disgrace. People wonder why Mifune's claims of having discovered a new dinosaur would be doubted in a world where living dinosaurs are known to exist. And when you put it that way, yeah, it does sound like a major plot hole. My first question, however, is this. What exactly is the time frame for these events? Or we can actually refine it and focus it a bit more to ask, when was Mifune fired? The English dub states that Mifune was canned, quote, 10 years ago, unquote. Now, if we take that number as literal and not a rough estimate, and we assume that Terror of Mechagodzilla takes place in its release year of 1975, that means Dr. Mifune was last heard from in 1965. Even if we allow a bit of wiggle room by saying it was roughly 10 years, the time frame still lands in the early 60s, a period where kaiju of all kinds are public knowledge. In that case, yeah, the term plot hole would seem to apply. Ah, but you might notice I specified that's what the English dub says. In the original Japanese, no exact measurement of time is given. The man from the Institute simply states that Mifune was fired a very long time ago, which could still be just a decade, or it could be much longer. Let's take another look at those photographs displayed while we hear Mifune's backstory. The photos are black and white, which implies that they are very old. Even if we're not meant to take these as literal photographs that someone took, the monochrome coloring is a visual hint that these events take place long before the main events of the film. If we combine that with how old Mifune is in the present, and how he's no spring chicken in the past, it might make more sense to think that a large chunk of his downfall occurred in the 50s. Of course, we still haven't really solved the problem, because the 50s are when kaiju first showed up in this timeline. In that decade, we see the appearance of 2 Godzillas, 2 Rodans, 1 Anguirus, and 1 Varan, all prehistoric creatures like Titanosaurus. Just to give myself a challenge, let's assume that Mafune's downfall takes place gradually over the full decade, specifically within a time frame where all these movies occur before he is finally disgraced and ostracized. In fact, let's also throw in Frankenstein Conquers the World, which takes place in 1960 as confirmed by the on-screen text that places it 15 years after the bombing of Hiroshima, so Baragon can be part of the picture. Does his downfall still make sense in that context?
Well, for starters, I think the skepticism around Titanosaurus is understandable, and I base this on stuff that happened in the real world.
History lesson time. The coelacanth was believed to be an extinct species of prehistoric fish until living specimens were found in 1938. It was the first of the so-called living fossils to be recognized by mainstream science, and everybody today accepts that the species is alive and worthy of preservation. Okay, now with that in mind, tell me how many mainstream scientists believe that there are plesiosaurs living in Loch Ness and Lake Champlain. I rest my case. Just because some living fossils have shown up doesn't mean every claimed living fossil is going to be instantly accepted.
Ergo, it's not so difficult to believe that scientists might still be skeptical of Titanosaurus even in a world where Godzilla, Rodan, and others have already made their presence known. Skepticism tends to remain. Now here's the twist. In order to believe this is really a plot hole, you have to focus on the wrong thing. Everyone's been focused on the skepticism surrounding Titanosaurus this whole time, and in doing that, they've missed the real reason Mafune was ostracized.
Pay attention to how the backstory is described. Mafune ruins his reputation not by claiming he found a living dinosaur, but by trying to make a mind control device that consistently fails to work, yet he continues pursuing it anyway. The more he sticks to his guns without getting results, the more people come to see him as a crackpot, and the more embittered he becomes.
That right there is the source of his downfall.
Now again, we're assuming that his downfall occurs in a time frame that allows every kaiju movie of the 50s to happen. So Godzilla, Rodan, Anguirus, Varan, and Baragon are all confirmed to exist at this point. Now assume that Frankenstein Conquers the World has just ended, and people accept that kaiju exist now, though barely anything about them is known for certain. Also assume that you're a scientist working in the same institute as our subject. You're in the institute, and in comes Madman Mafune claiming he knows about another living dinosaur that he discovered when nobody was looking. And guess what? His mind control device that's never worked before just so happens to work perfectly on this creature that nobody else has seen. How do you respond? Do you immediately cast aside your preconceived notions and congratulate him on his revolutionary discovery? Or do you roll your eyes and write it off as the latest deranged rant of a known lunatic?
My guess, most people would take the latter stance as their gut reaction.
Mafune's story just sounds too convenient. He's frittered his life away on a fool's errand, and now that some real observable phenomena have shown up, his claims sound like an attempt at piggybacking. Guess what, guys? I found a dinosaur too. It's really real, and my invention totally works on it. The deuce you say, Doc?
Ergo, it's more than possible for Mafune to have been written off as a quack for those reasons.
Now, there is one more aspect to consider. It was posed to me when I presented this theory to another person espousing the alleged plot hole. After hearing me out, he proceeded to ask this. Even if my proposed scenario played out as described, why wouldn't Mafune be sought out again as time went on? Why not look him up to see if he can really prove Titanosaurus is real, or see if he can reverse engineer the mind control technology left behind by the Exilians or Nebula M space hunters?
That one's easy to answer. Mafune was not sought out afterward because he was forgotten. Again, we can look to the real world for an example of how this is possible. I'm assuming that most of you know who Nicola Tesla is. Everybody these days has heard of him. Emphasis on the words "these days." There was nearly a century that went by in which Tesla was, to use the modern vernacular, memory hold.
Tesla pretty much pioneered our modern world, but he fell into obscurity thanks to multiple circumstances that worked against him. There was a brutal smear campaign by Thomas Edison, his falling out with J.P. Morgan, his exaggerated depiction in newspapers, and several mistakes like handing his blueprints for wireless transmission to Marconi without realizing a theft was in progress. Despite making a sizable footprint on the landscape of history, Nikola Tesla became a forgotten pariah within his own lifetime, and for decades afterward, the only people who knew his name were the people who made a point of learning about him. During that stretch of time, he was barely even a footnote, with his inventions and discoveries usually going uncredited, unless they were credited to someone else.
As we can see, it's more than possible for someone influential to be forgotten if their reputations are sullied. That's what happened to Nikola Tesla, a man who played a major part in shaping our modern world. In the fictional world of the Showa Godzilla series, Mafune doesn't even have that going for him.
Mifune's colleagues all believe that he was throwing his life away on a Sisyphean task and never took him seriously. What reason would there even be to remember him after he was gone? The man was a freak after all, someone not worth thinking about when there's real science to be done. Even if someone did think of him in this context, why ask him to reverse engineer technology that he couldn't even figure out on his own? Just because he coincidentally thought of kaiju mind control doesn't mean he's at all qualified to work on it, especially if, as established, everyone thinks he's crazy.
Well, there you have it. Mifune's downfall has little to do with the claim that he discovered titanosaurus. That was simply the straw that broke the camel's back.
Rather, his fall from grace had to do with the invention he could never get to work, yet still insisted on finishing. Unfortunately, it does make sense, though it doesn't make his alliance with the aliens any less treacherous, nor his fate any less heart-wrenching.
Well, as the man himself said, the die has been cast. Who knows if he was truly a guilty madman or just a victim of circumstance? Perhaps that's for you guys to decide. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Admittedly, the timeline is still a little confusing because it looks like the aliens showed up to turn Katsura into a cyborg long before their first invasion, but I can only handle one mystery at a time. In the meantime, though, please, check out the rest of the -1 Monstrous Moment playlist and see what other scenes have shown up.
Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.